Welcome to the Well-Seasoned Librarian podcast. This is season 14, episode 16. I'm your host, Dean Jones. All right, chocolate lovers, and I'm a very big chocolate lover myself, get ready for a truly inspiring story today. We're going to be delving into the world of the company Tony's Chocolonely, that not only is just making chocolate, but making a serious difference. They're on a mission to completely transform the chocolate industry from the ground up. Now imagine discovering that your favorite treat is built on the backs of exploited workers. That's exactly what happened when a Dutch journalist who went on to found Tony's Chocolonely was looking into the industry. They've made it their life's work to end exploitation of the cocoa industry completely. So come with me and listen to my conversation with Noelle from Tony's Chocolonely. We'll learn all about how Tony's Chocolonely is making waves in the world of chocolate, one bar at a time. Welcome to the Well-Seasoned Librarian podcast. I'm your host, Dean Jones. Today, I am very honored and very happy to be speaking with a representative of the company that I love so much, Tony's Chocolonely. I'm speaking with the representative, Noelle, from the company, and I'm so happy to be talking with you. Welcome to the podcast, Noelle.
Thanks so much for having me, Dean.
So I want to go right into the questions. I'm so, very curious about the country. I follow the company on social media, and I am very eager to always hear more from the company. I love all the adverts. I love the product. I was even jokingly saying I would get the tattoo of the logo, because I loved it so much. What inspired Tony's Chocolonely's mission to eradicate exploitation in the cocoa industry? And can we talk about that topic, exploitation in the cocoa industry?
I would love to. Thank you for that question. It's actually one of my favorite because I think we have a really unique origin story. So we actually started completely by accident. Our founder was a man named Toon, who was a journalist in the Netherlands, and he had a show, which the name I completely butcher as a non-Dutch speaker, but it's something like Keuringsdienst van Waarde, KVW for short. And there was one day in the early 2000s, he was flipping through his local newspaper and saw a teeny tiny article way at the back that said that forced labor still existed in the chocolate industry. And he was completely flabbergasted, thought, how in the world is this still happening? And why isn't it front page news? Luckily, being a journalist, he had a platform in order to explore that a little more. And he went on a whole investigation that lasted several years. He started by calling up all the big chocolate companies and asking them, hey, do you know what's going on? Can you tell me a little bit more about this? You're, some of the world's biggest sourcers, perhaps you would know. And unfortunately, that was a bit of a dead end for him. There weren't a whole lot of answers to be found there. So Toon, being the journalist he was, said, that's not a very good ending to this story. We have to keep pushing. Knowing that these chocolate companies were a large part of the cocoa industry, he said, well, there's a way I could get attention on this issue by potentially trying to sue them for not knowing more and doing more about this issue. However, usually big companies come with big lawyers, so probably wouldn't work out very well for Toon. So instead, he was really clever about this. He said there's this law in the Netherlands that's called fencing. And what fencing is it means that if you purchase a good and you know that that good was procured under illegal means, you are also culpable for that original crime. So, taking that knowledge, he sat down in front of his camera. He bought every kind of chocolate bar he could think of, ate them on camera, and then called up the police and said, I need to turn myself in. I am a chocolate criminal. And of course, the police laughed him right off the line. They didn't take him seriously at all because it didn't sound serious. But the truth was there was a really serious issue behind it. So Toon actually took himself to court and tried to get himself prosecuted as a chocolate criminal. Unfortunately, that case didn't quite pan out, one of the big reasons being that there was no direct link that could be drawn between the illegal child labor and forced labor that was happening on the ground at alarming rates in West Africa and the chocolate bars that Toon was eating, because there's no supply chain transparency in a lot of the cocoa industry. So there wasn't anything that was able to be done about it at that level. Again, we find ourselves at a potentially disappointing end to the story, and Toon, being the good journalist he is, said, it cannot end here. I don't want to believe that I have to live in a world where I can't feel confident that the chocolate I'm eating works to end exploitation in cocoa. So he said, I'm going to do things myself. He flew himself to West Africa, had direct partnerships with farmers who were fair trade certified, bought a lump sum of beans, brought them back to Belgium, had them processed into a limited edition run of chocolate bars. I want to say it was like 5,000 bars he produced, and just intended them to be sold at like a convenience store kind of situation in the Netherlands. And all of those bars sold out in a matter of hours because the country had really rallied around the story and believed in the cause that Tone believed in. And of course, after that kind of response, you can't just leave it there with no further option. So from there, Tony's became the company that we are today, named Tony's Chocolonely. Tony, it's a lot easier for English speakers like me to pronounce than Tone, and Chocolonely for his lonely mission to end exploitation in the chocolate industry. So actually, we say at Tony's, we're not a chocolate company that just has a mission to make impact. We're an impact company that happens to make chocolate.
I love that story. Now, can we talk a little bit more? Most people, I don't think, really have an awareness of how chocolate is made. I think most people think that just chocolate pops up out of the ether and exists, but most people don't know how it's made, and they don't really understand the wheres and why-fors of how it is created. How does Tony's Chocolonely define exploitation-free chocolate, and how do you ensure the supply chain meets the standard?
It's a really good question because I think the issues are really complicated, so I can't blame anyone for not knowing exactly what that looks like on the ground. Exploitation, when we talk about it, can mean everything from child labor to forced labor to deforestation. And all of these issues stem from the same root cause, which is poverty. We address poverty with our 5 sourcing principles at Tony's. It's kind of like our recipe for exploitation-free chocolate. So those sourcing principles include paying a higher price. That's a really important one. On average today, cocoa farmers earn just 78 cents a day. That's way too little to live on, well below the extreme poverty line set by the World Bank at $1.90 a day. So you have to be able to pay a higher price in order to enable a living income. Tony's does this by paying not only the fair trade premiums, but on top of that, we also do an additional Tony's premium that helps fill that gap between where those premiums get you and what it costs to have a decent quality of life based on cocoa farm outputs, etc. You also have to have traceability. That's a really big one. Like we just talked about in the story of Tone, a lot of the industry doesn't have that traceability. And in order to take responsibility for what's happening at the root, you need to know where that root is. Next is quality and productivity. This is a big one. Cocoa farms only on average produce about 30% of what they could. In terms of future-forward agricultural practices, cocoa is one of the least advanced industries. And so by implementing some more modern practices, you can increase the output of cocoa on a farm, which then increases farmer income. And then something else we do that I think is really interesting is we call it strong farmers, but what that really means is we work exclusively with cooperatives of farmers. Now, farms in West Africa are very small, family-owned and operated plots of land. It's not like the kind of things you're flying over in the US, these huge squares you can see from way in the atmosphere. It's nothing like that at all. So if you think about it, a small-time farmer doesn't have a whole lot of bargaining power against a big chocolate company or honestly even a small one. But when thousands of farmers band together in a cooperative, suddenly you have a whole different situation in terms of power dynamics and bargaining power. So we exclusively work with cooperatives. And the last thing we do is work for the long term. Now, if you think about it, cocoa is a product that you can only sell twice per year, at the mid-crop and in the harvest season. That basically means you're only getting 2 paychecks per year. Now, I don't know about you, Dean, but I have enough struggles budgeting for my year based on 2 paychecks per month. So it's pretty difficult to save money and invest back into your farm when you're only making 2 paychecks per year. And additionally, cocoa is a volatile product, right? We've seen a lot of these issues over the last year. So often farmers don't even know what that paycheck is going to be. It could be less than the previous year, even if you're outputting more cocoa. So what Tony's does is we sign 5-year memorandums of understanding or agreements with cocoa farmers, which essentially say that we will look at the living income reference price of cocoa and we will pay that every year for 5 years, so long as you, the farmers, want to interact with us. It's also a one-way agreement. Tony's cannot break it unless there is some grievous error on the side of the cocoa farmers, for instance, labor practices. On the other hand, farmers can dissolve the agreement at any point they want. Say they can find a better price elsewhere. So it allows them that power to really have agency over themselves. And with the five sourcing principles, using them all in tandem, that's what we use to address poverty. That's what we use to address exploitation in all of its forms.
So beyond the chocolate production part of it, how does Tony's Chocolonely advocate for fair treatment of cocoa farmers in their communities?
I think this is a big one for us. I feel like there will be a lot of people listening today where it might be their first time hearing about these issues. So a lot of the work that we do is around raising awareness. If you don't know a problem exists, then you can't address it. So we do a lot in that way. We shout it from the rooftops on social media, which I'm glad you mentioned earlier. That's my playground as our digital communication manager on Teen US. And we also work with other chocolate companies, which I think is something that is really unique to Tony's. In business school, what they would always tell you is your unique selling proposition is that thing that you should guard at all costs and not give away. And at Tony's, we say, that's the one thing we really want to give away. Please take our secret recipe. We'll give it to you. And we do that through Tony's Open Chain, which is a program that allows other chocolate companies or companies that use cocoa in their products to adopt our 5 sourcing principles and do things the same way that we do. Reason being, again, we're an impact company, not just a chocolate company. And our goal is to end exploitation in the entire industry, not just in our own supply chain.
Now, the first time I opened one of the bars, I unwrapped the wrapper. It was kind of reminiscent of when Charlie unwrapped one of the Wonka bars in the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It was really magical. And you had the broken chocolate bar branding where, it's a very different, usually there's exact individual squares, you break them off, etc., but this is very different. Can you explain the story behind this design choice for the bars?
Yeah, I love that you noticed this. It's one of my favorite things about the brand is we are very intentional in our design. I mentioned the brand name before as a really intentional choice. Even the color of our wrappers, like the red for the milk chocolate, is intentional. It's a really bright, disruptive red to cause a sense of alarm, a sense of urgency towards the issues that we're working towards in the chocolate industry. And the unequally divided bars mold is the same way. We actually used to have bars that were perfectly equally divided in these beautiful little squares. And one day we were looking at it, thinking about our mission, and said, you know what? It's really ironic that chocolate is perfectly equally divided in terms of the actual bars when the chocolate industry itself is so unequal. And we said, what if we were able to change the mold of our bars and that becomes a conversation piece that tells our story in the purest form, in the chocolate itself? So each time you open a Tony's bar, which are very large, I describe them as the size of my face, hopefully you're sharing it with someone, and hopefully they say, what is the deal with this weird chocolate bar? And that's an opportunity for you to share not only our chocolate, but also our story. Helps a lot with storytelling, it helps a lot with mission awareness and issue awareness, and I think it's something that people really gravitate to and they recognize and hold on to once they know that story behind it and are so willing to tell the next person. It feels like they're part of something, this bigger movement that we're creating.
It's really funny because that's exactly what's happened to me. I love the fact that they are really shareable bars. They really do invite sharing. And you can't help to because they're so big, obviously you're going to be sharing them. And I love to share my bars with people. And then I have had the conversation. I'm like, did you know this is a Tony's Chocolonely bar? And they're like, where'd that name come from? And then, you talk about it and you have a conversation. It's really kind of fun because you can kind of be a spokesperson, but it's also interesting and it's a way to share, your time. It's really fun.
It is. I think so much of chocolate is human connection. At the end of the day, it's such a happy product. Like you give it to someone as a housewarming gift for a celebration. You might be having a tough day and the chocolate bar is the thing that's there to pick you up. It's so much about the human connection, whether that's, farmer to farmer, farmer to business, or person to person when you're sharing it. And so centering it around conversation in that moment of sharing is, I think, one of my favorite things that we do. Also, speaking of sharing, I'll share one exciting detail that not everyone knows about our unequally divided bar, which is that even in the bottom left-hand corner of the bar is hidden a map of West Africa in the pieces. because we intentionally source our cocoa from West Africa, where the problems of exploitation are at their worst. So try and see if you can pick it out next time.
I will. I love that. That's really cool. I wondered about some of the sizes and stuff. And that's kind of nice. That's kind of fun to know. Now, I want to ask next. I see Tony's, like when I started noticing Tony's Chocolonely, it wasn't everywhere. And now I see it everywhere. I see it at Safeway. I'll see it at Target. I'll see it at Whole Foods. In fact, what I love is Whole Foods will have your Easter or your Halloween stuff, which is really
They
lovely.
do.
Yeah. I'm seeing it more and more now. But I know that like the other, so I won't name names, but some of the other companies are literally everywhere. And I'm personally a chocolate snob. Like I won't eat a lot of the chocolate that I grew up with just because it kind of stinks now. I don't like to eat it myself personally. It just kind of, I don't know what they've done to it over the years, but it doesn't taste like it did when I was a kid back in the 60s. So I don't know, like I just really like don't really want to eat a lot of that stuff. I'd rather have good chocolate. So I'm kind of like more choosy about that and stuff. But you guys are kind of like you're in select places, but you're not ubiquitously everywhere, like vending machines and stuff like that. So what are the biggest challenges Tony's Chocolonely faces in expanding its mission and products on a global market?
That's a really good question, and I think you've touched on a little bit of it too. There's just such a significant difference market to market for us. I feel that those of us in the US office are always shouting that, the US is so different than Europe. We can't treat it the same. So localization is a really big topic for us here at Tony's. When we started in the US, and when I started working at Tony's, which is about 5.5 years ago, at that period of time where you couldn't really find us anywhere, a lot of what we were saying as a brand is a lot of very European messaging. So for instance, a bragging point for us would be we're the #1 bar brand in the Netherlands. But you say that to an American and it's kind of right over your head. You're just like, it reminds me of that episode of Friends where Joey thinks that this Dutch girl said she was from Neverland, like from Peter Pan. Really, it just flies right over Americans' heads. Not because we're so bad at geography, though sometimes we are, I myself included, but because it just doesn't mean anything to you that it's big somewhere else. That doesn't mean that you're going to like it. We have different palates here, and we have to acknowledge that. And we have to understand our audience, their needs. We have to be able to speak their language, both literally and metaphorically. And we have to show up where they are, which I think is what you're touching on with, now we're in the Safeways of the world, the Walmarts even, and just becoming more widely available. So we are really trying to focus on being more of that mass market brand that is completely available. With more availability means that more people can join us in our mission by participating with chocolate. It also means that we're reaching a wider audience of people with our message, which is really exciting. Another thing, which I think you touched on, is the US is very taste driven. And don't get me wrong, that doesn't mean that there aren't people who are very attached to our mission, who share that widely and openly like you do with your friends. But there's a lot of people who first come to a chocolate brand for taste, and you can't fault them for that, right? Like chocolate is a luxury indulgence at the end of the day, and you want it to taste good. And I think that's something that our category is not necessarily known for, the specific like natural subsect of chocolate. And so that's something that we're really trying to play in. I think at the end of the day, you've had Tony's. I hope you can speak to this too, but we have really delicious chocolate. Like it really is incredibly tasty and indulgent. And so we're really in the US welcoming people who come for the chocolate and stay for the story after they've read the mission inside every wrapper.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I think I bought Tony's just because I knew the mission. I knew about the mission first. So I bought the chocolate knowing that it was, about ethical practice. So I was going to buy it anyway. But when I had the first bar, I was like, damn, this is really good. And I'm kind of like a chocolate purist. Like I said, I won't buy some of the big name brands because they just kind of stink now. And I don't like them. There's even some that have been bought in from European concerns that I liked when I was in England back in the 80s, and now they just don't taste the same. And I was reminded of some of the chocolate I used to have when I was younger back in Europe, and I was like, wow, this is actually really good. And then you guys came out with all these other flavors and brands and types, and I was just like, ah, this is just amazing. It's the best of all worlds. And now it's nice because when I'm at Target, I'm like, oh, I'm getting paper towel. I'll just happen to get some red chocolate buttons, and then I'm also like, oh, I'll get some kitty litter. I guess I'll also pick up a bar of the toffee, bar, as well. So pretzel bar. So it's always kind of nice to be able to kind of swoop into the candy aisle and grab stuff whenever I'm there. It's really fun. So I like that. Like, I definitely wanted to get on with the mission, but it's just also nice that the chocolate's actually really beautiful too.
Oh, completely. I think there's a lot to be said for buying a product because it does good in the world. But ultimately, if you're not actually eating it, that's also wasteful too. So you want it to be a product that tastes good, that is that thing that when you walk into a Target or your local bodega or wherever it is you do your shopping, you say, I think I want to treat myself to a little Tony's. And it also does something better for farmers too.
Now, here's a question for the food nerds that are listening. What are some of the exciting new developments or innovations Tony Chocolonely is working on to further its mission and product line?
So not to let all the foodies out there down. I can't give too much away. What I can
Okay.
say is that we've got some very exciting products coming this fall and again in the spring. So
Nice.
keep an eye on our assortment. Keep an eye on all those favorite distribution points for Tony's, from Whole Foods to Target to Walmart and more. And I would also throw out that through Tony's Open Chain, we make mission allies. Mission allies are the people who then use Tony's 5 sourcing principles to make their products. Namely, I think people in the US have recognized Ben & Jerry's, who joined us a few years ago now. We've got a couple more coming, so stay tuned for announcements as far as mission allies goes as well.
So this is the big question, I think, of this is really why we're here, I think, because I think the people who are listening are like me. What more can I do is the thing. And like, so how can listeners who are passionate about the ethical chocolate consumption get involved in supporting Tony Chocolonely's mission?
My favorite answer to give is it's very easy. Eat chocolate. So that's the thing I love about Tony's is truly every bite makes an impact. So even just in our milk chocolate bars alone, there are 132 cocoa beans that go into that chocolate bar. That's a
Wow.
significant amount for a farmer. It does make a difference. So even just by eating chocolate, by buying it for your friend, by grabbing that little indulgence on your way home from the market, it makes a big difference. But seriously, aside from indulging and treating yourself, there is another way you can really help out. It's sharing our chocolate and sharing our story. Tell a friend, tell a friend to tell a friend. At Tony's, we're all about that human element, like we talked about, all about the direct relationship, because direct relationships are powerful. At Tony's, we have direct relationships with our farmers, and we hope that through direct relationships, friend to friend, family member to family member, person to person, we can make an impact on the business that we're running here too. The more people that know, the more impact we can make, the more people who are conscious that there is a better option and that we can make change together. So it really is that easy. Just share a bar of chocolate with someone, tell them a little bit about our story when they ask about why it's so funky, chunky, and unequally divided. And that makes a huge difference.
I want to ask you, oftentimes Tony's is really engaged with social media. It's got a really wonderful presence on Instagram and other platforms. I really love interacting with Tony on social media. I want to ask you, sometimes you ask people for ideas for chocolate bars. What are some of the most interesting and unusual requests that you've seen down the line?
They come in all shapes, sizes, and forms, let me tell you. I think the most common one is anything to do with peanut butter. We as Americans especially are very peanut butter forward. Um, I would imagine that's one we're not going to hear the end of until we actually come out with one. Another one we hear a lot of is plain white chocolate. We have a lot of very fun, very crazy, classically Tony's white chocolate flavors. Not a whole lot of the plain, but then you'll get some more obscure ones too, right? You'll get can you make a turtle flavor? Can you make a hazelnut raisin flavor? They come in all shapes and sizes. And I have to say, as far as interesting and funny requests go, it was so funny that you mentioned a Tony's tattoo earlier, because one of my favorite requests I've seen of all time is working on social media. A fan reached out and said, hey, I would get a Tony's tattoo if you will supply me with free chocolate for life. And I don't know where that guy is today. I really wish we could have indulged him in that one. I'm sure from a contracting standpoint, that would have been really interesting for the lawyers to work out. weren't able to take him up on that, but I think
I think that was me.
fair.
I think I
It
said
must have
that,
been.
actually.
It mu
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? Let's follow up on that one later. Maybe we can still get you that tattoo.
Sounds good. Right. Do you use now? I love so many of the bars myself, though. This is going to sound so boring, and everybody's going to groan on this one, but I just love the plain chocolate milk chocolate bar because I just love to sit and eat it slowly over a period of time, and really kind of enjoy the pure chocolate flavor. To me, it's like mean, I love the others too. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I could eat an entire. I'm ashamed sometimes at how I can eat an entire Tony's Chocolonely bar. It's probably not a good idea to do that, really, but like I still do. I mean, let's just be honest. Sometimes I'll look down and only the wrappers left, and it's like, oh, I shouldn't have done that. But it's really hard not to sometimes, especially like the toffee pretzel bar. And I really love the white chocolate Pop Rocks bar. That was really wonderful. Do you have any favorites yourself?
Oh, I love that question. I think mine changes day to day, month to month. Being at Tony's, we're so spoiled for chocolate that I think I will eat myself sick of one bar and then move on to the next. Right now I'm back to my classic, which is the caramel sea salt flavor. Something about the way that it's salty and also sweet, and I'm such a crunch person, and our caramel is really different because it's a crunchy caramel, it's not a gooey caramel. And something about that just does it for me. That being said, the thing that I recommend to most Americans when they're starting with Tony's is our everything bar. It's absolutely crazy. I think it caters more towards the American palate. It's got pretzels and almond and nougat and toffee and caramel and sea salt. It's just packed of all of the good stuff with a very creamy milk chocolate base. So it's really crunchy. It's packed full of flavor. It's kind of like an everything but the kitchen sink kind of concept. And that's one of my favorite innovations. It's a really good one for snacking. My favorite product to bring home these days, though, if we're putting flavor aside and leaning more towards product, is our Lil Bits. So they're little spherical shaped balls, and each of them have a different thing in it. So in our caramel and cookie flavor, some of them are that crunchy caramel, some pieces bigger than others, wrapped in milk chocolate, and the other bits are cookies, also wrapped in milk chocolate. They're so crunchy, and I have that same problem where I will dip my hand in, think I've like only taken, a couple little bits here and there, and the entire bag is gone before I even know it. As someone who has eaten myself sick on Tony's, that is the one thing that I don't think I will ever be able to put down. It's so good.
Yeah, I've had to be careful with those because those can be really, really very addictive.
They'll sneak
Now,
up.
I remembered, I didn't think of this as a question earlier, but I noticed too, you guys work with another company that deals with ethical issues in production and such. You guys worked with Ben and Jerry's. How did that come about?
Yeah, Ben and Jerry's is such an important partner for us. They have worked with us through Tony's Open Chain. So what that means is they've committed to sourcing all of the cocoa that comes through their supply chain the same way that Tony's does. It's not the same chocolate. It's not going to change in taste or flavor, but it means that farmers are benefiting even more from that commitment. So again, when we talked about paying a higher price for cocoa, Ben and Jerry's was always fair trade certified as far as their cocoa went, but now on top of that, they're paying an even higher price and adopting all of those other sourcing principles, which is really exciting. And I think that just came out from, we play in the same space so much between fair trade and B Corporation. There's a lot of harmony between our two companies, and I think ultimately it just made sense to work together. Ben and Jerry's are also incredible when it comes to impact and being mission oriented. So I feel that they're always on the lookout for how to do things better.
Yeah, it was a really lovely combination, and the bars that you guys produced with them are really lovely too. So it was just a match made in heaven. I'm gonna ask you next, if I can, if you can give us any hints, what's next for Tony's Chocolonely?
Oh, I love this question. So we do have a lot of things coming up. We actually have so much up our sleeves that I feel like I can barely move my arms, if that analogy makes any sense. But the things I can give away is we are about to launch in Kroger stores this upcoming fall. So fans and shoppers of the Kroger brand will be able to find us in store finally, which is a very exciting development for us. Additionally, we are expanding our U.S. production, so not a lot of people know. Some of our bars are now produced out of Chicago, and I believe by the end of next year, we will be at 50% production in the U.S., which is pretty impressive. It also helps a lot sustainability-wise in terms of the carbon costs of shipping and whatnot. So it's a really intentional move for us, which is very exciting. Um, and then, like I teased a little bit earlier, we are growing our assortment in the US, especially around holiday. So keep your eyes out again this fall, this winter. And then something that I personally love to talk about on behalf of the brand is we are also really engaged with civic engagement work. So this fall, we'll be doing a lot of work around making sure that people know to use your voice, to use your power to vote, the same way you would use your voice and your power to share a chocolate and share a story, putting it towards this this right, this privilege that we shouldn't take for granted. So we're doing a lot to encourage folks to indulge in their right to vote while indulging in some sweet chocolate too.
I got to ask you, I grew up with the Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory books. I still have the hardback Willy Wonka books from when I was a kid with some, I think the time they had some branding with one of the companies that did the Wonka bars, and I have them as bookmarks still. I love those books that much. For you, did you read the Charlie and Chocolate Factory books when you were a kid?
Oh my gosh, heck yes, I did. And one of my most core memories is watching the Gene Wilder film with my father.
Yeah.
I was a child when the Johnny Depp one was coming out, and we would watch them back to back as part of the preparation. We got that Willy Wonka chocolate bar out of our local Blockbuster because it was back in that period of time.
Yes, yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
To go watch them. I feel like there's something about the magic of Roald Dahl and specifically that IP Willy Wonka that is just so magical. I think we get told at Tony's a lot of times that our bars feel like that because
Yeah.
on the one hand, they're so big that it makes you feel like a kid again. And I think something just in the way that our hand cut lettering and whatnot is kind of evocative of some of the magic of being a child. It just brings you back. None of that is intentional. We have no association with the Willy Wonka IP, but I think it's a huge compliment that people think of us when they think of Willy Wonka.
Do you guys ever refer to yourselves as Oompa Loompas?
No, but I would take that as a compliment as well. You can feel free to call me an Oompa Loompa.
All right, fair enough. Noelle, you've been a wonderful guest. Thank you for being on the podcast. I really have enjoyed getting a chance to talk to you. And also just thank you for the wonderful good work you do with Tony's Chocolonely.
Thank you so much for giving us a platform to say a little bit of something extra about what we do at Tony's to share a chocolate and share a story, literally. I've had such a great time. Thank you for having me.
It was my conversation with the wonderful Noelle from the company Tony's Chocolonely. You can purchase Tony's Chocolonely products in most really good retail establishments these days. You can go to their website to the link online. Please come back next week for more wonderful guests. And until then, I'll see you at the library.